This time, if I sue over this, I won't settle. I'll seek to have this meeting voided. Hearing no response, in addition to Ms. Day's previous conclusory averments, I continue with my comments. I came here today to talk about the fact that PSTA, I guess the camera's there. PSTA has lost nearly 6 out of 10 riders in the last 10 years. If you don't know that, ask yourself why you don't know that. The present situation is that PSTA's buses have essentially become rolling roadblocks, largely empty hulks, clogging up traffic and impeding other economically viable forms of transportation that it shares the road with. This is something that the taxpayers and voters notice. So what does the loss of ridership mean in dollar terms for the taxpayers? It means that each time a person decides to use PSTA's fixed route network to get from point A to point B, the taxpayer has to subsidize that journey with approximately $20. If that person then decides to use PSTA again, this time for the return trip, it means another $20 in taxpayer subsidy. My calculation assumes a ridership this fiscal year of 8 million riders, a catastrophically low number, which may not even be achieved. The lower the ridership, the greater the taxpayer subsidy. Now, PSTA ridership has been plunging for years, and that decline is now accelerating. I sent Ms. Gerard an email about that. I laid out my methodology. She did not dispute it. The purpose of my comments today is to lay out to this board and the taxpayers how PSTA got here. The key facts in this regard involve PSTA staff being wrong most every step of the way. Its critics being right, and its board being asleep, willfully asleep to boot. More on that later. The proximate cause for my visit today, PSTA's ridership in the fourth quarter last year, was down more than 20% compared to the previous year. Note that in 2020, in the fourth quarter, there was no vaccine. There was one for last quarter, yet ridership plunged more than 20%. The ridership, of course, has to be considered in the context of how much bus service PSTA provides. Vehicle revenue miles, a measure in the operating stats in your board report every month, is a good measure of the amount of bus service, in air quotes, provided bus service. This month's report shows that VRMs, vehicle revenue miles, increased 5.6% from 2020 fourth quarter to 2021. Yet ridership plunged more than 20%. As a natural result, PSTA's farebox recovery has plunged from 28% in fiscal year 2012, 10 years ago, to around 8 or 9% today. Farebox recovery is the percentage of PSTA's operating, not capital costs, that are paid for by its riders. I made some public records requests around this, but I couldn't get what is the farebox recovery right now. What was the farebox recovery in fourth quarter? Perhaps Mr. Miller can give that number for last quarter, fourth quarter. Farebox recovery was less than 6% in fiscal year 2020, but that was a year of zero fares for about half the year, which explains the low number. Fares are no longer suspended in this fiscal year, yet it's a third of what it was 10 years ago. So how did we get here? Let me start by using the failed 2014 effort by PSTA to hike taxes to pay for light rail here in Pinellas County. It was defeated with a resounding 62% no at the polls and serves as yet another example of PSTA staff and this board being on the wrong side of an important issue. Imagine if you'd had the wasteful light rail boondoggle to pay for as well at this point in time, on top of the plunging bus ridership. Anybody here who still thinks that we should have built the light rail, please raise your hand. No hands being raised. I will take that this board now finally admits that they were wrong and its critics right on the issue of light rail. PSTA and this board made this promise in 2014. I know it can't be seen from here, but It says here that if the referendum does not pass, PSTA will default to a depleted network of basic routes. 18 to 28% service cuts in 2017. That's what we were promised. So